Hello everyone, welcome to the fireside chat on 5G for consumers. I'm Mansi Taneja from ET Telecom. Let me set the context quickly. As we all know, India is on the cusp of moving to next generation technology 5G. The pandemic has created a need for smooth digital connectivity in various sectors. The data consumption by mobile users in India has hit the roof, and with the 5G launch, it is expected to transform India into a whole digital economy. Today's discussion will revolve around how consumers will benefit from 5G, what are the new use cases globally, and the ecosystem development. Without much ado, let me now introduce you to our eminent speaker, Mr. Adarsh Nair, Chief Product Officer, Airtel and CEO, Airtel Digital, Mr. Jasmeet Singh Sethi, Head of ConsumerLab, Ericsson. Let me start with Mr. Adarsh. As an operator, the last few years have been quite turbulent. How has the pandemic accelerated the adoption of digital services and the need for a connected world? As an operator, what have been your learnings which can be adopted well for the upcoming 5G services?
Yeah, first off, thanks a ton for having me here. It's a delight and a pleasure. So the last couple of years definitely has been very challenging due to the pandemic. And at least for Airtel, in that adversity, we also saw an opportunity. And when it comes to digital services, the pandemic has been a very relevant time frame for growth and innovation. And let me kind of share with you three areas where we saw this happen very clearly. One was, with the demonetization phenomena, there was a big push towards online payments. I think that was probably completed during the pandemic period. And the stories around when the pandemic hit, basic services such as your mobility, broadband, they became really critical, right? We saw tons of people even struggling to get their phones recharged. And that's when truly there was a question of is there an online way to go give access to these services to our end customers? And what was initially a bunch of tests during the pandemic, today is, the scaled way of the Thanks app being in the hands of almost, 100 million customers right now who are working with Airtel. And that's an automatic way by which people can recharge their phones. Partners like Paytm and PhonePe are ubiquitous right now as a mechanism by which people can recharge. We also saw another big shift in terms of broadband was previously a corporate phenomena. People used to typically log into broadband from work. Home broadband was not a high growth area pre-pandemic. Today, it's one of the hottest areas of innovation and growth inside Airtel. The growth in broadband is at least 20% CAGR year over year, only because now there's a shift from corporate to home in terms of where you want the broadband. And we've had to literally go resize how we go to market in order to facilitate this phenomena, right? Broadband coming home. So there is a huge demand on connectivity and people want to stay connected was the big takeaway for us. And 5G is just going to help us accelerate this phenomenon. We'll talk about that. The second area was health. We saw there was a lot of requests where remote health monitoring, remote consultation became very critical. So that was another area that dawned as a huge challenge for our consumers at the beginning of the pandemic. And finally, new habits were forming in entertainment. OTT video started getting popular, linear TV less so, but more OTT video. Gaming became like a hobby for a large swath of Indians. Today, there's reportedly about 320 million users who are actually watching, not even playing, games online. All these new habits were formed during the pandemic because of this need to be online to stay engaged, right? So that's the phenomena we observed. Now, straight out of that, when we connected back to 5G, what does that really mean? Over the last year, Airtel has been bringing some of these scenarios to you to just kind of color our vision on what could 5G be doing for us in these particular phases. So for number one, we'll talk about this later too. We do believe 5G means mobile broadband is now going to be ubiquitous across the country. And maybe at a later time, we can go deeper into what I mean by that. But broadband level speeds are going to be more accessible to a large swath of Indians when 5G comes on board. So that's a big one that we believe is going to be an upcoming service. Mm-hmm. The second aspect of it is we recently showed you the potential of basically an ambulance, and this is from the Apollo group of hospitals, being serviced via 5G so that remote medical help could be given to a patient in the ambulance while the ambulance was speeding towards the hospital. And this is where a doctor was logged in and doing a particular service on that particular patient while the ambulance was in motion. Entirely possible because of the low latency service that 5G provides. So this is definitely a scenario that could be practical. We showed you what's happening with the whole, Kapil Dev and the 175, the match that he made 175 runs. The entire thing was visualized in 3D with a hologram. Those are the kind of experiences you can expect to come when 5G lands. And of course, gaming. If gaming is important now and if it's widely adopted now with 5G, gaming is going to be one of those industries that's going to benefit tremendously, because now you can see that even gamers on mobile phones will be able to perform at the same level as a gamer who's on a console or on a desktop. So these are some of the kind of obvious, I would say, kind of learnings that has come out of the pandemic, which I think will influence the kind of services that will be delivered within probably the next couple of years. So that's my 2 cents on the topic.
Right, right. Quite interesting there. So moving on, Mr. Jasmeet, let's talk about Ericsson, which is a global player. If you can share some of the global learnings and insights on consumer trends on 5G, and specifically to India, what value do you think 5G will bring in for consumers?
Right. First and foremost, really glad to be here with you and others, and it's really exciting times as we kind of move towards the auctions and probably seeing live deployment. But the past, I would say, 3-4 years have shown us that this technology now with 5G is accelerating at a pace that we haven't seen before. If we were to compare 4G and the adoption and compare it with 5G, I think we see a faster pace of adoption of 5G. So I think that's one of the most important trends that kind of talks about the consumer demand. At least in the pioneer markets when we talk about US, South Korea, China, and so forth. The second important trend that we see is that others did talk about mobile broadband, and I totally agree with it. I think it is going to be one of the most important use cases also in the Indian context, and we see that 5G, by its sheer reliability and capacity, is able to improve speed and elevate congestion issues and so forth. And we see that consumers who are on a 5G network are probably more satisfied than 4G users, even in the pioneer market. There are issues though pertaining to the perception of availability. And that's, I think, an improvement area, which is also a learning for operators globally, that we cannot just rely on population coverage, which has been the metric so far in terms of how we go out and communicate, but rather the time that a consumer actually spends connected to 5G. I think it's the most important metric that has shown that really moves the needle on satisfaction. The third trend is really that we are seeing that 5G is changing consumer behavior. We are seeing globally that 5G users are much more engaged with heavy bandwidth services, whether that's streaming of high definition video, whether that is XR, using augmented reality applications, or even enhanced video, because we have seen a lot of global operators go ahead and launch new services, for example, in the area of sports and entertainment. So the ability to have multi-view, personalized viewing experiences. So the ability to watch a concert or a game from different angles. So you could be your own creator, is a great example or a use case of what 5G can actually bring. And then again, gaming, which others also touched about. We see that 5G users on an average, spend 2 times more on cloud gaming in comparison to the 4G users. So that's the third big sort of trend that we see that's important. The fourth one, which again goes back into network performance, is the importance of indoor coverage. And that specifically came up, especially in the pandemic, when we were relegated indoors. And we saw that the first experience consumers were having with 5G was essentially indoors. And that created a lot of challenges on how you perceive 5G performance, because the macro coverage wasn't a problem, the indoor coverage was a problem. And that comes back to the spectrum bands that are going to be used. The low band is going to be extremely important and will continue to be important, because we still will continue to work from home, especially in the hybrid sort of working nature that we are moving towards. Consumers still will spend and entertain and work through their households. And there, I believe indoor coverage is going to be super important, and again an important metric that we need to look at. From an Indian context, I believe, as Adarsh pointed out, we will see significant improvement in speeds. We will see fixed wireless access. The importance of fixed wireless access, especially in the Indian context, is going to be very important. We will see new use cases that are made for India. In a way which is going to be very different from the global context, and that I think is very important, that we need to take care of the local culture and sensitivities in mind when we are thinking about these use cases. And then we will also see that the ecosystem, especially the startups, the entrepreneurs, I think will be more geared up in order to kind of provide and curate those services. So there is an opportunity for the service providers to work with the ecosystem out here, with startups in the local ecosystem, to kind of curate those new experiences for the Indian market. And I believe the Indian consumer is much more ready for 5G than what we have seen before. We already see, back in 2020, when we did a survey, we saw that 20% of the urban Indian market, which is at least the top 15 cities, already had 5G ready handsets. Now that has almost doubled in 2022. So there is a significant mass of consumers with 5G ready handsets in their hands. They're just waiting for the networks to light up. And then it's a question of how we're going to roll out 5G and what is going to be the consumer proposition. But it's really going to be exciting. There are a lot of things that I think will be interesting learnings also coming from the Indian market, that the global operators will keep a lookout on.
Great. Quite an insightful response and trends there. So, in continuation with the same question, Mr. Jasmeet, if you can elaborate on the consumer use cases, you talked about, customization of use cases specific to the Indian market. But what use cases you have already seen being picked up in the global markets? Can they be replicated in India, or India will see totally new use cases?
Yeah, I think if you look at the first few years were very turbulent when we talk about use cases, because I think there was a struggle trying to find those use cases for 5G. But the last year or so, we have suddenly seen a spike in global operators going ahead and commercializing a lot of these use cases, because a lot of these use cases were still pilots and showcases, and that's all great to kind of create the awareness of the potential of the technology. But we found that the early adopters are really looking for commercialized use cases. They're looking for those new innovative services. So if you look at, there are regional differences in terms of the use cases deployment across different markets. If you look at Northeast Asia, we see that it has the most diversified base of use cases today, right? From gaming to XR, to enhanced video, to music. They have a complete mix of these services, and they are going beyond just the traditional services to more adjacent areas, which is applying XR for education, for example, or applying XR for medtech in a way. So they are much more about immersive video when we look at markets like South Korea and Japan and China. Then we come to Europe, and we see that the major use case in Europe is essentially cloud gaming. And we see majority of the operators in Europe are deploying cloud gaming. That's one of the major areas, or mobile gaming. If you move to US, the emphasis changes to sports, because you have big major leagues like NBA, NFL, MLS, both from football to hockey. These leagues are essentially driving new experiences. And so enhanced video in the sports dimension, coupled with immersive experiences like augmented reality, are the type of use cases that we are seeing in the North American sort of region. Now, when it comes to India, we of course see that there is a lot of interest in in-venue event experiences. So how can we really enhance the spectator experience? And I don't know if you watched back in October 2021, in the ICC Champions Trophy, the IPL sort of trophy, we did deploy one of the use cases, which was around getting 35 cameras on the field and providing you with a 360-degree view of a replay, basically, which is not heard of before. You would have a replay which is 2D, and maybe you'll have a couple of camera angles, but as a consumer, you can basically do a time synced 360-degree view of that particular moment in the match.
Mhm.
Now that is something which has already been deployed in Canada, US, and South Korea. But I think with the sort of cricket frenzy nation we are, we will see that deployment also happening in stadiums and spectators. So 5G is needed both from a broadcast perspective, because you don't need to do truck rolls of fiber to the locations for these cameras, but also for the spectators, since you are in a location which is where the footfall is like thousands of people. You need that sort of reliability and capacity to enhance those experiences. Then of course gaming, I think that's an important area. We have seen the rise of PUBG, Fortnite, and Roblox, and other sort of gaming metaverses, and we continue to believe that cloud gaming could be a real opportunity for the
Mhm.
Indian market. And then coupled with mobile broadband and fixed wireless access, I think in the short term you do have those use cases that are necessary.
Mr. Adarsh, you talked about mobile broadband speeds for consumers, but if you can elaborate a bit more on that, what's the potential that 5G holds for consumers? And if you can also throw some light on the top use cases where India's 5G ambition can perfectly fit.
Good.
Mr. Adarsh?
And yeah, so I would say Jasmeet covered a lot of the use cases really well, but let me try to build some incrementality and maybe detail out a couple of use cases that we at least believe
Sure.
is very practical in the 1 to 2 year time frame, right? So
Right.
before I get started on mobile broadband, just so that everybody is like clear on what do we mean by 5G bringing broadband to you on a mobile basis. Today, when you look at the internet, you can get the internet which is 4G on your phone, or it could be like the wired connection that you get into your home, right? The wired connection that you get into your home in India today, even to this day, you could have a 2 Mbps connection going all the way to what I would say the 40 Mbps connection, which is what many people associate with the internet, and then going to 300 Mbps all the way to 1 Gbps, right? So this
Mhm.
300 Mbps connection is what I think probably many of us are on. It's a great connection. You're able to play Fortnite, as Jasmeet talked about, on an Xbox console or on a desktop. So that's what I would say is like a golden benchmark, if you will, when you say you are on high speed internet, right? That 300 Mbps connection. Of course, there is a 1 Gbps connection, which is like excellent, but I think very few in this country are experiencing a 1 Gbps connection, at least at your home. Now, what happens when 5G comes in? Many telcos, including Airtel, we've already demoed a 1 Gbps connection on your mobile phone in a test basis, right? So
Mhm.
that's incredible if you can get that kind of speeds on 5G. The reality could be if you can get into that 200 to 300 Mbps connectivity on your phone, if you can get to that kind of connectivity, you are pretty much on high speed broadband on your phone. And the
Mhm.
minute you've got that going, you can tether the phone to other devices inside your house. So without a wire coming into your house, you now have the 200 to 300 Mbps connection powering experiences inside your home, because the data is now coming through the phone. And then let's say it's
Mhm.
going to the TV. And so now you can watch an HD movie on your TV screen entirely through your mobile connection. That's just one
Mhm.
scenario. There are going to be other devices that you can actually install in your house that's going to tap into the 5G network. And it's got the ability to give you sliced service, extremely high SLAs, and other parameters like latency and speed, specifically for your home. And there's going to be literally devices built that you can buy and that you can actually bring this kind of high-speed internet into your house, right? So in layman's term, that's what we mean by 5G powering the mobile broadband scenario. Yeah.
Mhm.
So if that is clear, with that kind of power and capability, what are the kind of use cases we would imagine India is going to experience? I think we heard just me talking about cloud gaming, right? Cloud gaming is going to be something that we could even see in India very much within the year in a POC level, and maybe in 2 years it could flourish. Because I do agree with Jasmeet, there's a lot of appetite for gaming in India, right? And what does cloud gaming do? With your high speed connections, every phone now becomes a terminal where you can do like incredible AAA level gaming. You don't have to buy a PlayStation or an Xbox, which means what? Hundreds of millions of like consumers in India who may not have the access or the affordability to go buy like a console can today enjoy AAA gaming on your phone. When you think deeply about gaming, a lot of gaming is also about games such as Valorant, games such as, the erstwhile PUBG, where, the competitions matter, experiences matter, latency matter. All that with 5G will be at a very excellent level on your phone, which means the gamer on the phone is going to be on the same kind of, I would say, capability level as somebody who's working on a PC or a console. This basically democratizes the environment, brings a lot more gamers into the network, a lot more players who previously could not compete at the same level can now compete. They can go to esports, they can actually earn a living. All this is possible once 5G democratizes the internet, and the mobile phone becomes a very powerful device, rivaling a computer, rivaling a console, right? So this is one scenario in entertainment that I'm painting.
India still has a low level of broadband penetration. You're talking about maybe the metros and top cities. So how do you think when 5G will come in, it will bridge the digital divide and improve the total overall experience for consumers?
Yeah. So the answer to that is very simple. I think it also goes back to what Jasmeet was talking about, how 5G should be implemented, right? I do believe the first year of launch, you're going to see, tens of cities having 5G coverage. I don't think it's going to be hundreds of cities, because there is an overlap between 5G ready phones and other devices and 5G ready towers. They need to be together in the same area for this thing to work.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of 5G towers and there are no phones, and then business does not work out, right? So I think the first rollout will be tens of cities having the ability and coverage for 5G. Consumers being in those cities who's got access to the phones that can do 5G. And that audience, everything I just spoke about, the possibilities exist. They can actually, there could be a young gamer who's rising and becoming the top star in YouTube on their phone. It's possible in that audience, right? All the scenarios I talked about is possible in that audience. Now, the big challenge that is then on companies like Airtel and others and other corporations is, how do we expand the usability and the availability of 5G across India? How do we take 5G to the far corners of India? So there's a job to be done on the telcos, which is how do we make more and more towers 5G enabled, which means the right radios are on it, etc. Which I think is a job we are ready to do. At the same time, there has to be penetration of devices that can support 5G in that area, which is now the consumer upgrade cycle. And all of us can make a guess on, whether it's going to take 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years for India to be dominant in terms of 5G devices being more than 4G devices and other devices, right? So when these two phenomena overlap, naturally, I think the digital divide is going to get fixed. Because one of the fun things about potentially what's going to happen with 5G is the pricing of a 4G plan and a 5G plan probably is going to be the same, which means affordability is not going to be a big challenge. So if affordability is not going to be a big challenge, then what are we talking about here? It's all about coverage and 5G ready devices. So assuming there is good mid to low cost 5G level devices that appear in 2 years, Airtel along with other telcos are ready to make sure that the coverage of 5G is all across India. And at that point in time, the digital divide is actually fixed, because everybody has access to this high-speed environment and on which lots of rich services are going to be rendered. And some of them are going to be free, others are going to be paid, and we're going to see like what are those services that's going to come that's free that whole of India can access. And like programs like Teach India, a lot of these like programs that are here in the service of the nation, they also get that same level of access. So this will be in the hands of every child in the country, which in itself is going to be a big unlock when it comes to education, right? So that's the way I see the divide being broken, which is one of affordability of the plan, affordability of the phone, widespread coverage of the phone, and then on the telcos to make sure the coverage of 5G is all across India.
Let's move on to Mr. Jasmeet. Jasmeet, we have been talking about benefits of 5G to consumers, but as you know, India is a very price-sensitive market. Others do mention that users will be able to pay the same price because plans would be same. But what, according to you, will happen? Are consumers ready to pay more for 5G plans?
Yeah, I think Adarsh kind of gave out the recipe book, on their strategy on not charging a premium for 5G. But basically, what we have seen globally, there are three strategies that have been employed by operators in order to monetize 5G. Because at the end of the day, you have to make money out of your assets, right? I mean, it is going to be a challenge if we keep investing and we don't get the returns on 5G. So one school of thought is, again, that you should not charge a premium for 5G. And we see that with 2/3 of operators globally who are not putting a price premium on 5G. And that school of thought perhaps is correct, because in the first few years, the coverage is going to be pretty spotty. The availability is not going to be widespread. So it's questionable, going to a consumer and asking for a premium for 5G when the network is not necessarily built out. The second school of thought is that we do see operators, which is 1/3 of operators globally, who are putting a premium on 5G, but then they have an extremely high pace on rollout. These operators have already achieved almost like 70-75% of population coverage already at a very brisk pace, or they have enhanced amount of spectrum, that also puts them in an advantageous situation in comparison to their competitors in the market. So if you see some of the European markets, if you talk about Portugal and Spain and Ireland, for example, there is a price premium of about €5, if you were to go for on 5G. The third school of thought is that we should not charge a premium for 5G, but we should figure out a way that we can migrate consumers from basic plans to higher tiered premium plans by tiering the benefits on these plans. So maybe you would start with a basic plan, which is essentially a best effort 5G. You will, of course, have enhanced speeds in comparison to 4G, but then there is no guaranteed quality of service, or what we call speed tiering model, where plans are decided based on speed tiers. So you could have a plan based on 50 megabits per second, 100 megabits per second, going up to about 300, 400 megabits per second. So that's one level of tiering. But the second level of tiering is again service tiering, where you could add more benefits, content rich media, OTT services, based on, if you were to pay higher, you get more value benefits coming out of C. So there are these three models that we have seen. And in the Indian context, I believe, as Adarsh is saying, I mean, we will, of course, start with, if we need to drive adoption, and we need to, of course, accelerate the pace of network coverage, maybe the strategy of not charging a premium for 5G ensures that a large majority of the existing installed base with 5G ready handsets gets on 5G. And that, in a way, is also helpful, because you are translating consumers on a more modern technology, a more spectrally efficient technology as well. So especially in areas where we do see congestion and so forth, and capacity constraints, it's perhaps beneficial for the operators to transition their high power users or high paying users to a more spectrally efficient sort of a network. And once the network is built out, once you have reached almost, I would say, 40-50% mark on population coverage, that's the point that you rejig your consumer proposition and have this sort of tiering approach, so that at the end of the day we are able to monetize 5G and show something on the balance sheets at the end of the day. So that's what I believe might be the way that the operators could perhaps look at the 5G strategy, and that's a playbook from global operators that we have seen. When you look at Verizon's, AT&T of the world, or even a lot of Asian operators working in emerging markets like Indonesia and so forth, they are thinking along these lines, which is to tier the benefits, migrate consumers to higher tier plans. As you move higher, the more benefits you get, and you feel as an end consumer that you're deriving more value. If you're paying more, you're deriving more value out of the 5G plans.
Mr. Adarsh, I just want to ask you, everyone knows Indian telecom market is such a competitive market. It's cutthroat competition and price sensitive. So what is Airtel's strategy to grab the largest pie of the 5G consumer market? If you can also talk about the new products, innovations, and that would be great.
That's a great question. One of the things we discuss internally at Airtel a lot is the pivot that I think the company made back in late 2018. And Gopal, our CEO, he's publicly stated the strategy, which is the focus of this company has, for the last many years, now been entirely on this construct of the quality customer, right? So we are now focused on a singular construct of being the best telecom experience there is, and then adding on top of it additional services that could benefit the customer. So that kind of lays in nicely with what we heard from Jasmeet also earlier. I don't think when 5G comes, the strategy changes. I think we're going to double down on being the telecom that can provide the best experience on 5G. We're going to invest there. We're going to be the telecom that's going to spend enormous resources on ensuring that our customer service experience, our ability to do fault repair, our ability to take and service the customer, their services through our app, through our call centers. It's going to be the best possible experience we can provide the customer, layered on top of the core product, which is the mobility product that we have on 5G, right? So that strategy does not change. I think that continues. Where I think you can expect some very interesting services to be layered in on top is even in the 4G world, one of the products that Airtel is now brought to market is Airtel Black. And it's a very simple construct that says, be it broadband, be it mobility, DTH, or any of the other services we offer, we allow you to combine that, and we allow you to kind of have a single experience, single bill experience, single call center experience construct, right? And if you're an Airtel Black customer, for example, you call our call centers, the call will be answered in 60 seconds. And you actually have a personalized concierge who's answering you. It's a human being that you know by name, right? So this is the continuation of the strategy going into the world of 5G. And these are all digital services that we are building. You can actually serve a request on the app, and then when you call the call center, your personalized concierge, if you're on Black, actually knows and have context that you've actually opened a complaint on the app. All that is the digital layer that is supporting the core business. Above and beyond that, we are investing a lot in certain areas. For example, entertainment you're already aware of. We do have Wink, which is a large music app. It's only going to get better in a 5G world, right? We're making huge investments in the creator economy, bringing better music from all regions of India and adding it to that music service, which could be an add-on service to the 5G plan. We've recently launched Airtel Extreme, which is the fastest growing subscription platform in the country. And there it's a singular construct of, can we aggregate all video companies in India under one umbrella and offer that as a service on top of this 5G service, right? That's yet another service. Gaming. You're going to hear some news on gaming from us very soon. We are going to actually bring gaming to market in a very material way to support the gamers and the consumers. Concepts like cloud gaming will be embedded in that particular service that we'll bring to market, right? So we will get into gaming because there's high relevancy between 5G and gaming. So that's going to be a service we launch, which all of our customers will benefit from, because that rides very well on top of that 5G mobile broadband that we talked about. So that's on the consumer side. There is definitely some services we're going to launch. On the B2B side, we have one of the largest B2B businesses in the country. And by the way, we are the largest IoT company in India, right? The 60% of the market share of IoT sits with us today. So it's a no-brainer for us to double down and bring new services in the IoT sphere through our B2B division. And if you look at some of the demonstrations we've already provided, the whole remote, health service in an ambulance construct, those are all like us painting a vision of what could be possible as we work with companies like Apollo and others and create these very relevant services in the Indian market. And that's a B2B play for us, because we're giving our capability to a partner to deliver a service that's meaningful for the end consumer. Industrial IoT. We are going to work with some of the biggest factories in the company to help them automate, to create 5G private networks. So that's also going to happen, right? So these are some of the services, both for the consumer and for the businesses, that we believe we will be bringing to market on top of the core 5G experience.
Good conversation. And with this, we have come to the end of the insightful discussion. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.